Okay, is everybody ready to start our conference? Okay, I think so. So, dear participants, dear speakers, dear guests of our conference, I enjoy the privilege to lead our conference's proceedings today. So, on behalf of all of us, let me welcome you here today. We are pleased to open the session of the third track of the 2020 IEEE International Conference on Advanced Trends in Information Theory. Our track is dedicated to technologies of informative security. I'm looking forward to this day and express my anticipation of witnessing even more scientific discoveries, even more thought-provoking and fruitful discussions in the same inspiring academic atmosphere that we had the opportunity to enjoy yesterday. The chair of the organizing committee, Professor Alexander Yudin, is forced to attend the meeting of the Accreditation Commission at the National Academy of the Science Service of Ukraine. So if he has the opportunity, he will definitely join us later. He wishes us effective and useful work. Everyone has a program for our meeting. It is available on the conference site. So today we will hear 7 reports in our track. And we are sure that the reports will be interesting for everyone. Let's agree on the time of the report. I suggest it should not exceed 5-7 minutes. Does anybody have other suggestions? No, then this time is accepted. Okay, 5-7 minutes to report. And now let me introduce Svetlana Rzhaeva, who will present the first report of our track, named The Use of a Genetic Algorithm in the Problem of Distribution of Information Security, Organizational and Financial Resources. Svetlana, over to you.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to be here today and to perform before you. And the theme of our research is the use of genetic algorithm in the problem of distribution of information security, organizational and financial resources. A few words about our authors collective. We are so pleased that this research become not only through international universities of Ukraine, but also it become international with our friends from Kazakhstan. And it makes it more valuable as we see this. And let's start discussing. Developing and implementing an effective information security system for a specific informatization object is an important task, especially in the face of uncertainty and the changing landscape of cyber threats. The defense side has to simultaneously solve the problem associated with the redistribution of resources between the objects of protection, for example, financial and organizational resources, taking into account the steady growth in the number of cyber attacks as well as the level of their complexity. The problem of allocating limited resources of the protection side for many information security objects continues to remain relevant, with necessity the new research in this direction. And as in recent years was many tens of publications around the world have been devoted to the development of methods and algorithms for solving problems of multi-criteria optimization of resource allocation. And most of them do not contain specific example of application, and that makes us to develop a genetic algorithm for solving problem of allocating limited resources allocated to ensure the information security of the protected area. And on this slide, you can see generalized GA scheme for optimizing the resource allocation of the protection site, made actually by our collective. And on the next slide, we perform the chromosome will consist of a 20-bit string. The first population was created using a random number generator, and at the first stage, six chromosomes were generated, which you can see on the left picture. And in the course of computational experiments, 20 tests were implemented, as you can see on the last figure. And these tests are enough to obtain the optimal fitness function value. And in conclusion, I would like to say that a model of a genetic algorithm is proposed for solving the multi-criteria problem of allocating limited resources allocated for the protection of ICO information resources. The model, in contrast to existing solutions, uses the Bellman-Zeit principle, which make it possible to solve multi-criteria optimization problems for the allocation of resources of the ICO protection site. And the proposed genetic algorithm and the software product developed on its basis will allow analyzing various options for the number of resources that ensure the achievement of the specified value of ICO security. Thank you for your attention. That's all.
That's it.
What?
Okay. Thank you, Svetlana. Could I invite your questions now, please? And may I ask you one question? The demands for different information resources, demands for information security of different information resources are different. So how they influence on the use of a genetic algorithm?
Actually, we take into our consideration that it is accepted that a company can carry out only one type of work at a time, taking into account all the criteria at the same time.
Okay, thank you. And another questions, please. There are no questions. Okay, so our thanks for sharing this experience for us. Thank you very much, Svetlana. And we go ahead to the next report. And now I want to present the next speaker, Yuri Dreis, with the report Method of Fuzzy Classification of Information with Limited Access. Yuri, over to you.
Yes, thank you. And I will doing the so-authored report, call it the name. It's, I screen my presentation. You can see my presentation?
Yes, proceed.
Okay. It's my report. It's a method of fuzzy classification information with limited access. And what is introduction? The usually examination of media material of information also used the list of information constituted the state secrets and the list of official or service information. Including the actors of the brief description is created degree and restructured access of summarizing data which constantly the information with limited access. Accordingly, this media material containing such information are classified as secret, top secret, and special importance. It's for state secrets and make market of official and also bias use for official information. This list classification of information can be presented as complex-oriented information network, which accepted ontological hierarchy with ability to determine the value importance of this classification information. When we analyze the modern literature resource, shows the lack of a scientific and methodological base, which can be used to solve the problem in quantitative and qualitative assessment of importance classification information. This is especially important when there is no complete information about the subject and initially data value of rely on judgment and intuition of the expert. We usually name the Hammond factor. That's why the mathematical proposed apparatus of fuzzy set theory is proposed the use with fuzzy deterministic quantities. That's why proposed of this work we developed the method of fuzzy classification of information constitution of classification information to determine a degree of secrecy in the examination of material media information according to established criteria. How we know the complex-oriented information network list of classification information? It's a concentrate of set information resource of classification information, which consists of oriented information elements cliques combined into the network of central complex order with the basic parameter of this information. We have 5 main parameters of this method. It is a list of data information, which constituted this classification information from list of classification information, which constitutes the state secret and service information. 2 parameters, it's the object of data. 3, it's indicators of object of this data. 4, degree, it's the secrecy of this data. 5, auxiliary words used in these articles of list classification information. And as results of stated above, the guaranteed of this set vector are described as a vector set of input information, vector set of this object, vector set of indicator of this objects, and in figure 1 you can see the structure parametric model of this method. After to do results of fuzzy modeling, we have 2 belonging function and equivalent model fuzzy classification information. That's why its conclusion is proposed method constraints of this development of fuzzy classification information will determine of belonging the object data of information that constrain classification information, and its indicator of the exit of create and use articles list classification information. It is expected that based on the used formula description language, this list of classification information, the method will be support to process of sampling new information elements or article of the complex-oriented information network. This list of classification information with multi-dimensional space of indicators and trace areas of classification information. That's all. Thank you for attention. Maybe a question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Yuri. And I think our speaker is already waiting for our questions. Please do not hesitate to ask any questions you may have. And Yuri, in general words, why do we have to classificate information with limited access?
No, in Ukraine we have a law. It's on access to public information. In this law is classificate information for different classificators. It is a public information, it is a state secrets, it's a personal data and other. That's why we must to do access to different classification information from established criteria. This is criteria to establish it in the law too. And we have proposed this method to use for different access to use fuzzy classificators.
Okay, thank you. And this method will help us to classify this information. Yes?
Yes.
More effectively. Please, any question? No questions? Okay, thank you, Yuri, for presenting this topic, and it is beyond any doubt on time for our society and for Ukraine. So thank you. And now we can go ahead to the next report, and the next research will be presented by Andrei Terещенko. The report is the title of his question of dependencies between input and output data in the implementation of multi-digit algorithm in a parallel computational model. Please, Andrei, over to you.
Everyone, do you see my screen?
Yes, we see your screen.
Good morning, colleagues. I am presenting the report which is dedicated to detection and testing of dependencies between input and output data in the implementation of multi-digit algorithms in a parallel computational model. The report is prepared and written together with Valery Konstantinovich Zadiraka. For developing the efficient, meaning fast algorithm of method, we need to organize effectively our time. Usually we have the first part of this for the theory and time to implement algorithm. Sometimes we can't start implementation if there is no data to test results. Developing algorithm for multi-digit values besides data needed to check correctness of algorithm. It's needed to have wide range of length of multi-digit values. Talking about parallel computational model, I mean GPU. GPU stands for Graphics Processing Unit, and GPU is video card which is installed in computer. And this video card is based on technology single instruction multiple data, abbreviation SIMD. Each of parallel processors executes the same instruction, but processes different data. If there are separated units in video card, then we could say it about multiple instruction, multiple data, abbreviation MIMD. You know that processor operates data and smallest piece of information is the bit 0 or 1. For showing results of generated values, I used hexadecimal numeral system, which has radix of 16. Unlike the common way of representing numbers using 10 symbols, hexadecimal uses 16 distinct symbols. Most often the symbols from 0 to 9 to represent values from 0 to 9, and from A to F to represent values from 10 to 15. On the slide, there are some examples of addition in the hexadecimal numeral system. Talk a little bit about criteria of generating multi-digit values to check the correctness of operation. Firstly, we are talking about very long values, and the multi-digit values consist of words of length of power of 2, for example, 8, 16, up to 256 bits or even longer. The dependency between generated input and output values are very simple to memorize and check it visually. We could start from simplest operation, and there is addition operation on the next slide, and there are two examples of generated input and output multi-digit values to check correctness of this operation. There are 8 words, and each word consists of 16 bits. The first example of generating values is simple. The next one is for checking transferring carry flag. And you know that the carry sign is added automatically in sequential computational model, but in parallel computational model, the carry sign is bottleneck of overall performance. It's needed to implement the additional logic to care about the carry sign. And in parallel computational model, it's important to know that the carry sign is transferred correctly, not only between data for one parallel processor, but also between data of parallel processors. On the next slide, each word contains max possible value or almost max value. And these cases in test theory are called extreme cases. Using these values, we could check that all bits are involved and all bits produces correct results, including transferring the carry sign. There is subtraction operation on the next slide. And for each word, the smaller word is subtracted from the greater word. In example 5, and in example 6, it's vice versa. For each word, the greater word is subtracted from the smaller word. And in this case, it's possible to check transferring the carry sign from higher word to lower word. The next slide is more interesting as there is a multiplication operation. This is my lovely operation. And you know that the performance of asymmetric cryptographic system depends on performance of a multiplication operation. There are examples of generated values for this operation, and the article contains formulas using which is possible to generate multi-digit values as long as you can for input and output results of each operation. Example 7 contains inputs with the same values, and these values are simple. You see the result is also simple. And in the result, the value of each word is increased, and then the values is decreased. It's easy to check the result of multiplication. Figures 9 and 10 and 8 and 9 contain different input values, but with different lengths of words in bits. There is also simple dependency to memorize the result like this. The next slide contain example of formula from article where n is a very big positive number. There are more examples of generating input and output values to check correctness of multiplication operation. And in most cases, I use the last example because input values contain max value in one word, and it's very easy to check and memorize the result of multiplication of very big multi-digit values. The formula in lemma 10 is very simple to generate input and output values. For asymmetric cryptography, it's also needed to have test data for generating multi-digit values for multiplication by modulo operation. There are already two operations, multiplication and division. In some examples, you see there are different values or almost different values. And you can see that input and output values for figures 14 and 15 are the same. So it's easy to check results. Article contains lemmas and proofs to explain why these values are equal. On figure 16, you can see two input values are equal, and that it's also easy to check and memorize. The one of the slowest operation of symmetric cryptography is explanation by model operation. The article contains formula, but without the proof because of restrictions to number of pages. The formula contains only two parameters, big N and small n. Big N, the number of words in multi-digit value, and small n is the number of bits in each word. The rest parameters could be calculated easily. The formula gives possibility to generate very big input and output values for explanation by modular operation. Depending on the length of values in words and number of bits in each word, the value 1 in result will be set a little bit differently. Summarizing, the article contains lemmas which show cases of generated input and output multi-digit values for following operations. And we use cases which are simple to memorize and check visually. Authors believe that there are still such relations between input and output data. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Andrei. And so, do we have any questions for the speaker? And may I ask you the first one? How do the obtained results of your research affect the performance of cryptographic systems, or maybe testing subsystems for these systems?
Good question about testing performance, and but we use some kind of extreme cases to check as much as possible bits in each input and output values to check correctness operation. And talking about performance, we need to have multi-digit values. I would say the special with special multi-digit values, because in some cases we need to test performance, but we understand that the structure of multi-digit values could have influence on performance. I mean, for example, if there are more bits like zeros, or if there are, for example, max value in each word, then the result of performance will depend on this construction. So testing performance, we try to generate multi-digit values in such a way to not to have influence on performance, some kind of like average number of ones and zeros in the whole structure.
Okay, thank you for the detailed answer for my question. And please, our participants of our conference, please, I invite you to ask questions for the speaker, please. So I think we do not have any questions anymore. So
You're welcome.
Thank you, Andrei, for sharing your developments for us, with us, and wish you another scientific results. So we go ahead to the next report, and it is a great pleasure for me to introduce the next speaker, Katerina Molodetska, with her report, Counteraction to Strategic Manipulations on Actors' Decision-Making in Social Networking Services. Please, Katerina, over to you.
Welcome, dear colleagues. I'm glad to present you the results of my research. The topic of my research is Counteraction to Strategic Manipulation on Actors' Decision-Making in Social Networking Services. Due to the high popularity of social networking services, they have become an object of interest for intruders. Despite the growing number of social networking services users, they demand to demonstrate their own political will, the existence of conflict between representatives of different political movements, hiding their intention from the enemy. Decision-making by actors is carried out in conditions of uncertainty. As a result, game theory models of democracy can be used to describe the influence on social networking services content on actors' decision-making processes. In the organization of decision-making processes, some conflicts may arise as a result of subjective and distinct choices. Research of this problem has led to the formulation of the Arrow theorem on the impossibility of democracy as a collective choice. This theorem proves that democratic elections cannot be called fair in the sense that their results adequately turn the votes of individual voters into the will of the entire nations. As the result of this approach, fair elections involve voters expressing their independent judgment about candidates. However, the independence of such actors' suggestion in these social networking services caused doubt on because of systematically disseminated target content to influence the public consequences. Therefore, a promising field of research is to analyze the specific of strategic manipulation of decision making by actors in social networking services. The research aims to improve the security of the social networking services information space for social communication by developing effective measures to counteract strategic manipulation in decision making by actors. Social networking services act as a platform for actors to express their own opinion and fulfill the right for free speech. Social surveys are an indispensable tool for analyzing public opinion. Figure 1 displays the impact on actors' decision-making when conducting social networking services survey. Let me consider the general formulation of the task of rational alternative choice. Each actor has his own linearly ordered set omega on the set of alternatives alpha, the survey profile. The polling procedure is the function which turns a series of sets omega into a general ordered list F. Actors' decision-making processes in social networking services are similar to the electoral process in the formulation of the Arrow's theorem and have characterized by such features: universality, completeness, monotonicity, no influence, and independence from the extraneous alternatives. The purpose of an actor's participation in the social networking services survey has defined under 3 conditions on slide 10. Based on the research results, we formulated practical recommendations to counteract strategic manipulation in the social networking services for different types of surveys. The results, depending on the survey type, are presented in Table 1. Overall, one of the most popular ways to monitor public opinion on selected key issues is to conduct survey in social networking services. The results of the survey are used for further decision-making by actors in real life. Therefore, intruders use survey procedures and their results to manipulate public opinion. For the first time is used the Arrow paradox that formalizing the impact of strategic manipulation on the results of selecting alternatives when conducting social networking services surveys. It's possible to counteract strategic manipulation by preventing possible poll results from being announced in advance. This approach will help to prevent the informational and psychological impact on the opinion of social networking services actors through the use of spiral of silence, herd instinct, and opinion leader profiles. Thank you for your attention. And do you have any questions?
Okay, thank you, Katerina. And please, dear participants, ask your questions to Katerina. So I can start. And Katerina, can you explain in more details the obtained results in table 1?
Okay. In general, we have two main types of surveys which can be held in social networking services. This is, we can choose an alternative, or we can use rating survey on a continuous scale. If we use choosing an alternative, the first type of survey, we should use these two recommendations. It's ensure that no reliable information on the results of active survey has been published in the social networking services, and the use of precise alternative wording in the survey. If we use the second type of survey, the first recommendation is the same as for previous type of survey, and the second recommendation is ensure that the social networking services do not provide any information. In first type of survey, the information which is presented doesn't have to be certain. And in second type, we don't have public any information. And there's a difference between these types of survey.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Do we have any questions? So, many thanks for your speech, from which all of us will certainly benefit, especially as social networking services are on time now. So thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to Mikhailo Kostyuk to represent his report named Methods of Security Authentication and Authorization into Informational Systems.
Okay, thank you. Just a moment, I'll start my presentation. First of all, I'd like to say hello for everybody. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes, we see.
Okay, cool. So let's start my presentation. The theme of the report is methods of security. Methods of security authentication and authorization into informational systems. So first of all, let's start from the agenda. Today we will speak about authentication and authorization. What is the difference between these two terms and what are their purposes? Also, we'll define two ways of the login. First will be via OAuth and OpenID protocols, and compare this method with simple login with simple credentials. And also we'll describe all their advantages and disadvantages. So let's start from the authentication. Authentication is probably the most common requirement of any program. The ability to quickly and easily register or log in into a website or a mobile application plays a huge role for the user. There are many ways to organize authentication and authorization informational systems. Typically, authentication is used to provide login, and it's primarily a security tool for personal user data. It is the first level of protection against receiving any system information. In turn, authorization helps ensure data integrity when running multiple different users with different permissions. Authentication and authorization are two key functions of the service infrastructure to protect sensitive data and transactions from unauthorized access by attackers. Although these two terms are used in the same context, they represent fundamentally different concepts because they provide protection in complementary ways. Authentication is used to verify the identity of the registered user. Authentication is the process of verifying credentials such as user ID, name, email address, phone number, and password. Authorization, in turn, occurs after the user's identity is successfully established by the authentication system. The authorization process determines a person's access to certain resources, information, files, databases. The authentication factors required for authorization may vary depending on the security level. So let's start from, so let's describe some ways of the usage of the OAuth and the OpenID for authentication and authorization. OAuth is an open authorization standard that allows users to access their private data, such as photos, videos, contact lists, and so on, stored on the site or another site without having to enter a username and password. The protocol is based on the use of the JSON Web Tokens when interacting with protected resources. OAuth allows users to give sites access tokens to data hosted on the service sites. Each access token provides access to a specific site, to specific resources, and for a specified period of time. This allows users to give third-party sites access to their information stored on the other devices or on the other services, providers, sites, and so on, without fully transferring the data itself and without using a username or password. OpenID is an open standard and decentralized authentication protocol. It allows users to be authenticated by cooperating sites using a third-party service, eliminating the need for webmasters to provide their own ad hoc login systems and allowing users to log in multiple unreleased websites without having to separate identity and password for each. As an example, by means of C# programming language, such things as OAuth and OpenID are provided by extension of Identity Server. On the current slide, you can see the login with the help of OAuth into mobile application and getting some data by means of some kind of API and Identity Server, which plays roles as authentication and authorization service. So, okay, let's move next to the simple login. Login with simple credential works differently. On the slide, you may see the process of login with simple credentials. So first of all, login is a word identifier that is used to identify users in computer systems and sites in order to further log into them. It's kind of username for a particular system or site. The login password connection is always unique for a certain system and serves as a path to the account. The main feature of authentication with a simple login and password is that in this case there is no standardized protocol for interaction between the client and server. That is, the implementation of the approach is completely transferred to a software developer. Thus, it's very difficult to track all possible vulnerabilities in the implementation of a secure login. It should be noted that in the case of login in via a pair of login and passwords, it's necessary to additionally organize a secure storage for credential as well as additional checks before receiving login data. For example, it's a good idea to store passwords, for example, in the storage in hashed form. As usual, to generate a hash of the password, MD5 hashing algorithm is used. The main MD5 algorithm operates on 128-bit state divided into 32-bit words. These are initialized to a certain fixed constants. The main algorithm then uses 512-bit message block in turn to modify the state. Sorry. And the processing of the message block consists of the similar stages turned rounds. Each round is composed of 16 similar operations based on the nonlinear function, modular addition, and left rotation. Okay, so moving next, let's talk about peculiarities of the open authorization with OAuth and OpenID and login with simple credential. All the advantages and disadvantages are described on the slide, and I would like to say some additional notes. Access to the system is protected by both as authentication and authorization. Any attempts to access through the authentication by entering credential can be accepted only after successful authorization. Conversely, if the attempt is authenticated but not authorized, the system will deny access to its resources. Although both terms are often used in combination with each other, they have completely different concepts and meanings. If authentication is who you are, authorization is what you can access. As information technology does not stand still, modern security systems such as OAuth and OpenID should be used to ensure reliable login, although their implementation is more complex. To expand their capabilities, if necessary, much easier. Also, I would like to say some words that OAuth and OpenID allows to limit access to the user's data and allow accessing when authorization token expires. While login with simple credentials, just a moment, when login with simple credential, the main feature of this authentication is that in this case there is no standardized protocol. So for the interaction between client and server, in this case, the implementation of the approach is completely transferred to the software developer. And this is, I think, the biggest disadvantage for such a way of login. So thank you for attention. That's all. Maybe some questions.
Okay, thank you, Mikhailo, for your presentation, and I invite our participants to ask questions to Mikhailo. And while our participants think about their questions, I ask you the first. So, can you explain in a few words the value of your research in science and in practice?
Okay. As I'm working on post-graduation work, I would like to say some words about this approach with using standardized authentication and authorization protocols. We live in a fast-moving world, and also we have such things as GDPR that works on European Union and also all over the world. And even when we're talking about informational systems for when working with informational systems which work not only for internal use in Ukraine but also for the whole world, we have the situations when we need to store the information in some ways in order to do not break the rules of GDPR. And also, in these cases, we have the situation when we have resources for the development of some functionality. In our case, it's authentication and authorization. And so the comparison of these two methods showed that the realization of simple login with simple credentials is much more easier, but we, in this case, we need to store the information about the user in such ways that we'll suggest. By this idea, we see the situation when my work, which I'm developing as a post-graduation student, will have some problems for the European markets, for the European organizations, educational organizations, actually. And so in this case, the usage of standardized protocols, which will help to store the information in some specific storages for specific country, for example, or maybe it will be generalized storage for all the countries. All this depends on the law regulations. And so it was very important questions for the development of the work, post-graduation work in this case, which way of the authorization or authentication should be used.
Okay, thank you. Your answer was not a few words, but it was an extended answer. But thank you very much. And have we any questions to Mikhailo? So we do not have any questions else for you. So thank you for the detailed presentation. And the next speaker who I would like to introduce will be Igor Terekovsky with his report named Determination of Science of Information and Psychological Influence in the Tone of Sound Sequences. Please, Igor, over to you.
Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. Just give me a second. Now you can see my presentation, yes?
Yes, we see your presentation, but
Okay.
it is not started. Please start
Yes,
presentations. Okay.
Okay. Dear colleagues, we would like to present the report on topic Determination of Science of Information and Psychological Influence in the Tone of Sound Sequences. Today, internet-oriented mass media are one of the main sources of the distribution of multimedia messages, which destructive influence largely determines the negative trends in the change of psycho-emotional social society state. At the same time, the events of the last 4 or 5 years indicate that the use of the most sophisticated methods of destructive influence on the psyche of people, especially adolescents and youth, provokes the disorientation of their social activity, causes disorganization activity, generates psycho-emotional and social tension. Note that the organization of the counteraction to information threats of this type is impossible without the use of effective automatic means of recognizing the presence of a destructive effect in the multimedia messages. The issue is complicated by the fact that in some cases the verbal content of messages is neutral or even positive, and the negative impact on a person is caused by the non-verbal component of the sound sequences. This explains the relevance of the scientific and practical task for developing means of recognizing the destructive influences in the non-verbal content of the sound sequence in multimedia messages. In the picture, one can see the standard sequence of stages of the procedure for analyzing the key of music. Summing up the results of analyzing the literature, the expediency of correlating the first technology development stage for recognizing destructive psycho-emotional influences in the sound sequence of multimedia messages with the determination of significant science of informational and psychological influence in music was established. Thus, the purpose of this article is to determine the significant science of informational and psychological influence in the tonality of sound sequences. As a starting point for the study, the hypothesis was accepted that it is possible to determine the science of informational and psychological influence in music by analyzing common pieces of music that are used in multimedia messages, which destructive properties have been proven. At the same time, based on the results of analysis of literary works and data, such characteristics of music as ripple, the presence of a binaural effect, changes in the main tone should be studied. Based on the hypothesis formulated, the music of the song «Не хочу ни любви, ни почести», that is, I want neither love nor honor, was used as the object of research. This music is often used as a background in videos in one of the most famous suicidal games, Syndicate Blue Whale. The amplitude time diagram of the sound of music is shown in the figure. It can be noted that, especially at the beginning and at the end of a musical fragment, the period of a sharp rise-fall of the sound amplitude is about 5 seconds, which corresponds to the period of fluctuations in the active attention of the person. Analysis of the spectrogram shown in the figure indicates the low frequency tonality of the music, which, according to literature sources, should enhance the psycho-emotional impact on the player-listener. Using the results obtained, the dependencies of the amplitude frequency indices of the fundamental tone on the number of the quasi-stationary fragment were constructed. The graphs of the constructed dependencies are shown in the figures. Moreover, in the graphs, the abscissa axis corresponds to the number of quasi-stationary fragments, which in turn corresponds to the sounding time of the music under study. According to the analysis of the dependencies shown in figures below, the change in amplitude frequency parameter of the music of song I Want Neither Love Nor Honor has a periodic character with a period of 5-7 seconds. As a result of the conducted research, it was determined that significant signs of information and psychological influence are low frequency sound. In this case, the value of the maximum average amplitude of the entire sound signal is in the range of between 40 and 100 Hz. The periodic nature of the amplitude time indicators of the sound signal with a period of between 5-12 seconds, during which the signal amplitude increases linearly from 5 to 7 times, and then over 200 or 600 of seconds abruptly decreases to the base values. The periodic nature of the amplitude frequency indicators of the fundamental tone of the sound signal with the period of 5-7 seconds. During this period, the frequency indicators of the fundamental tone are in the range of between 300 or 400 Hz, and at the end of the period, there is a sharp jump in the frequency up to 1000 and from 1000 to 3000 Hz. The amplitude indices of the main tone during this period, according to a linear law, decrease by 6 to 12 times, and at the end of the period, they abruptly increase by the same amount. It is proposed to correlate the ways of further research with the development of a method for recognizing the presence of destructive influences in the non-verbal content of the audio series of multimedia messages distributed in internet-oriented mass media. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much. And so, do we have any questions to this speaker? Can I ask you, the topic of your research is the influence and psychological influence of sound sequences. So, is the effect of the sound the same for everyone? Or it differs?
Actually, no. It has a purpose to have the same effect, of course, for all the people. But as we can see, and it is proven that the mostly effect is on the youth, on the adolescents. So for younger people, the effect is larger.
Okay, thank you. And please, any questions? So we do not have any questions else. So may I thank you on behalf of all of us for this exhaustive report. Thank you. And now I want to yield the floor to Yurkaev Andriy with his report named Protection of Information in Assessing the Factors of Influence. Please, Andriy, over to you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, dear participants of the conference. For your attention, a report on the topic Protection of Information in Assessing the Factors of Influence. The effective solution of the said tasks directly depends on the development and implementation of the latest information technologies to the cybersecurity activities of entities which are based on the results of scientific and technical activities of domestic and foreign scientists. The furtherance of obtained during HEA assessment can be reduced to a specific number using a technology known as fuzzy inference. Its methods, aggregation, communication, defuzzification allow to translate a fuzzy estimate into a clear and unambiguous one. Among the existing technologies was chosen the one that uses the simplest methods that have been proposed by scientist Mamdani. Applying the Mamdani method to the obtained membership functions two results were obtained on the basis of which a test schedule was constructed, which states that the genetic algorithm is more careful in working with influencing factors that gives ample opportunities for further assessment of factors and their utilization. Based on this model and analysis of 10 specific of higher education institutions in the city of Kiev is carried out appendix 10. Conclusion. Models in protection on information that include artificial intelligence technologies in combination with classical decision-making methods can be used not only in the HEA selection, but mainly in the areas of business management and planning in general. This greatly helps managers to increase investment flows and increase the likelihood of making an informed decision in the face of business uncertainty and variability. The report is over. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Andriy. Do we have any questions to the speaker? We do not, as I hear and see. So our thanks for sharing this experience with us. And we have just heard the last report on our track. Maybe somebody wants to make an announcement now, please. Nobody wants, yes? So, closing the conference track 3 session, let me express our joint gratitude to all the wonderful speakers we had today for their input, to all the participants and respected audience. On my own behalf, I know that all the works are very important and significant. Thank you all for your participation. I wish you further efficient work and significant scientific results. So thank you very much. And our track is over, is closed. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.